Welcome to this video demo where we show you the procedure to install the Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system on an IBM Power Systems environment. To get started, let's go into the Hardware Management Console. This HMC or Hardware Management Console can manage multiple Power Systems servers. So here we have 4 of them. This is 851 through 854. Let's pick one of these servers and install Linux as a virtual machine on one of these servers. So let's go into sys852. And it looks like I have 3 not activated partitions. Before installing Linux, let's view a few partition related information and also some HMC related information. We could do that on the graphical user interface, but I'd like to show you some commands on the HMC command line interface as well. So let's log into the HMC CLI. Okay, the first command is lshmc, just lists some configuration relating to the HMC itself. So I'll do an attribute of -V that will list the version of the HMC that's currently running. So we are running version 9 release 1 service pack 940. There are other attributes as well. For example, -B will show you the BIOS level of the HMC that's currently running. Okay. So now let's attempt to query the HMC so that it can list all the managed systems available, the same thing that we saw on the graphical user interface. So to get that, we'll use the ls-sysconfig command. And we need to say -R, what resource type are you looking for? I'm looking for my managed systems. And we'll say -F and then specify name : serial _num : state. I'll explain it just now. So -F takes in an attribute list. So I basically want the output, but I only want the name of the managed system. I only want the serial number of the managed system. I only want the state of the managed system. So I've just delimited the output with a colon. -F parameter lets you filter the output based on what you need. So here's the output of that command. So here we have sys851 to 854 and sys852 is here and it's in an operating state. Now, what if I wanted to see all the partitions that are available on one server? So to do that, let's do the ls-sysconfig command again, but this time we'll do the managed system -M. Sys852 is the name of the server, and inside that I want to query all the partition resources, -R lpar, and again we can filter the output and say name and state. And here you can see the available partitions in this particular managed system. And let's try to install Linux on this one. Sys852 and S1 lpar2, that one is not activated, and it looks like we can run Linux on it. Other things that you would like to do from your HMC, for example, would be to see if I have enough memory available. So let's do that using the lshwres command, hardware resources, -R. So in this case, I'm looking for the memory resource and on which system, on this particular system, and I want system level information. There are many other levels of information that you can query, so you can refer to the Knowledge Center for that. So in this case, we see that total available memory on the system is about 65.5 gigabytes, and it shows me what's available and so on in this particular output. Okay, we can do the same thing but for processors to see how many cores are available. So this is a Power 8 server. It should be about 20 cores available. 20 cores, 20 CPU cores available on one machine. So that's really good. And it looks like 18 of it is available for me to use. Now, similarly, we could do lshwres and I could do -R IO to see IO related information. And we could use the -R subtype to filter the information even more. For example, I want to see only the available IO slots. So I could do subtype slot and on the sys852 system. And here we see the available IO slots. So for example, this slot has got a dual port fiber channel adapter and so on and so forth. now that we've seen a few commands on the HMC, let's go into our VIO server. The VIO server is a partition on the power systems server, which does all the virtual IO related stuff. So let's log in. I'm in. Now, one of the commands that everybody would like to do is lsmap command. This is to see the mapping of the physical cards and the virtual cards. So let's do lsmap minus all. So that's basically physical devices and virtual devices. And in this output here, for example, I see vhost 0. So that immediately tells me this is a partition. So it looks like we had 4 partitions. So the first partition is called vhost 0 and its partition ID is 3. And similarly, we have vhost 1, vhost 2, and vhost 3. Now, which of these partitions is the one we need? So let's go and find out. So let's go here. So if you go into this particular partition, you could click the I here, and that will tell me, oh, this is partition ID number 4. Okay, that's one way to check the partition ID. So let's go back to our VIO server, and it looks like partition ID 4 is referred to as vhost 2 on the VIO server. And it looks like we have 2 virtual target devices that have been mounted, which I just did before starting this video. And so we have VT-OPT2, that's an optical device that's been mounted, and it has a backing file, which is our RHEL 8.1 installer. So this is the equivalent of having a CD or DVD drive on your laptop and inserting a RHEL 8.1 ISO installer on it. So that's been done on this particular machine virtually using the VIO server. And we've also got a VT-SCSI 5 device, so which is a virtual SCSI device for backing storage attachments, and it looks like we have backed it up with a logical volume called S2-L-PAR1. So let's look at the volume groups that have been configured. So here we have lsvg command, and looks like we have 3 volume groups: root VG, data VG, and rep VG. And I know that my logical volume is available in the data VG group. So let's do the lsvg minus lv and data VG command, and that should show you the available partition, and it shows me a few other information here. To view some more information about the logical volume that's available on our partition, let's do the lslv and then the name of the logical volume, and here we get the information regarding that specific logical volume. Okay, and finally, how did that Red Hat Enterprise Linux installer get there? So we basically downloaded the Red Hat Enterprise Linux package, we extracted it on the VIO server, and then we did a command called make-rep command, and we created a media repository. And you can see the output of that using the lsrep command, and it looks like we have the RHEL 8.1 file mounted to 2 optical drives. So in this case, VT-OPT0 and VT-OPT2. So as you can see, the same file can be backed to multiple optical drives. So in our case, for the partition on which we will be installing, we have mounted VT-OPT2 as we saw in the output of lsmap minus all. Here is our host. Now let's go into the GUI as promised, and here let's see a few other things that may be of interest to you. So this partition has been created with a particular profile. So let's go and view what its properties are. The profile's name is called normal. So let's click normal. And here it says that this could be an AIX or Linux partition, and its system name is this, its partition ID is this. Now let's click processors, and here it looks like we have shared processing mode, and this means that it will be getting processor cycles from a shared pool of processors. So the minimum required before this machine will boot is 0.1 of those processors, and then we have 0.25 as the desired and maximum of 0.25, and then we've specified a limit of minimum of 1 virtual processors and a desired of 2. That means that these 0.1 processor cycles will be allocated to a minimum of 1 vCPUs on the server and will scale up if needed to 2 vCPUs. Let's go into the memory section, and here we have minimum of 2 GB memory and desired of 2 and maximum of 2 as well. And so we just want to keep it small, so we'll keep it 2 GB. And IO will list all the available IO adapters on the system. Let's click the virtual adapters tab, and here it looks like we have one Ethernet interface adapter ID of 10, and then we have 3 client SCSI adapters which are all mapped to the server SCSI adapters on the VIO server. Okay, so we saw one of this here when we logged into the VIOS system. And there are other settings like power controlling and settings, and which is not of interest to us, so let's just cancel and exit out of this one. Now we could power this on and enter the SMS mode directly from here, but let's try to do that from the command line interface so that you could use this command later on. So to do that, the command is change sysstate, so ch sysstate, and state of which one do you want to change. So I want to change the state of a partition on a managed system. So let's do sys852 minus r lpar. And what would I like to do? I need to power it on. So minus O for operation on. And I'm going to use the normal partition profile that we saw before. So minus F stands for partition profile. So minus F normal. And then we want to boot into the SMS menu and not into other modes like the open firmware and others. And what's the name of the partition? To identify the specific partition, let's do the sys8521 minus S1 minus lpar2 was the name. Let's press enter. Now it looks like that particular partition is booted into the SMS mode. So how do I verify that? So to do that, let's open a console into that machine. HMC lets you do that using the VT menu command. So do VT menu and let's specify number 3 for sys852, and we'll specify number 2 for S1 lpar2. And it looks like it's booted into the SMS mode or the system management services. Now let's select 5. Let's select 1 for select install boot device, and we'll list all the available devices. Now it looks like our VT OPT mount was successful, and we have here our SCSI CD-ROM, and the other disk that I mounted is also available. That's good to see. It's a 10 GB hard disk that's available to install. Okay, so now let's do number 3 and boot from there. Let's do normal boot mode and we'll exit from SMS. As it's booting from there, let's press E so that we can edit the grub configuration through the grub shell. Let's see why I do that in a minute from now. Okay, so now I would like to specify the IP address for this Red Hat Enterprise Linux system. I'd like to say, use this DNS server, and I'd also like to enable VNC so I can remote into that machine and then install the operating system. So to do all that, let's edit this particular grub configuration. So specify IP equal to, and I'll explain what this syntax is. So IP equal to, give it an IP address for this particular virtual machine. Okay, and then there is a colon, and then you need to enter a server IP address. in our case, we don't have a different server IP, so it's just the same. So let's leave it blank. So I'll put another colon to leave it blank. And then we have the gateway IP address, 10.8, another colon, and then we specify the subnet mask. So that would be 255.0. And then we will put another colon and give it a host name. So the partition name was this 8521-S1LPAR2. And just to avoid any confusion, so I'll just name it the same thing, give it the same host name. And then we need to specify the Ethernet interface. In our case, it was called ENV10. I learned it the hard way by not booting in and then going into the Anaconda shell and then figuring out that this was the name of the interface there. And then we'll specify :none to indicate that there's no auto configuration. That's basically disabling DHCP because we have specified a static IP address. And then we put another colon, and now we specify the DNS server. So in our case, let's enter the DNS server that I have. And then we put another colon, and if you have a secondary DNS server, you put that here. I don't have one. Let's put another colon, and the last entry is for the NTP server. So you could specify your NTP server if you have one here. And I put a space, and I can say now VNC, also start the VNC service. Okay, so that looks correct. Now let's press Ctrl X to exit and start. Okay, it looks like it booted into Anaconda, which is the initialization method for most Linux distributions. So we've come here and it looks like VNC server is now running, and it says you can connect to the VNC server at this IP address. Now here is where you can also enter the shell by doing Ctrl B and then 2 to get into the shell, and then you could view the IP interface information here by going into etc sysconfig network scripts. And here's where you can see the name of the interface that's defined on the system. But anyway, we can go back to the main menu by doing Ctrl B1 again. It goes back. Now let's open up our VNC server and try to proceed with the graphical installation there. So it looks like this is the one I need. Click continue, and we have English as the language. So let's select that, click continue. Now we can specify a lot of properties here, as you can see, but the main one is the installation destination. So let's verify that our disk is available and selected. So here I have 11 GB disk, this one. So let's select that and click done. And now it says your current software requires 8.2 GB available, this much. And so right now there is no space available because there's already a running operating system there, maybe. So let's click reclaim space, and it looks like there is something running in there. So we could just delete all the LVMs there, and we can click reclaim space. And now the whole disk is available for this operating system installation. So you need to click begin installation, and while it's running, Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8 also lets you set the root password and also create any additional users you'd like. So let's click the root password, and let me set my root password. Now this is a weak password, and that's okay for me because it's just for demo purposes. So I'll have to click done twice, and then we can also create a new user, for example, admin1. Click done twice. Now we wait for the installation to complete. It looks like the installation completed. Now let's click reboot to reboot and start using it. Now let's go back to our console here on HMC. It looks like the machine is rebooting. This time we won't go into the SMS menu. While booting, it asks us to accept the license information. So I accepted the license information and then it takes me to the boot prompt. Now let's log in as the root user. I've already set the password during installation. And we're inside our Red Hat Enterprise Linux operating system. Now to verify the operating system that's running here, we could do the cat etc red hat -release command, and that outputs what's in this file, etc red hat release, and it looks like we're running rel 8.1. The other command would be cat proc version, and this shows us the version of Linux kernel that's running and also the architecture of the system, which is PPC64LE. This server has the PPC64 system architecture, and this is the little endian version of the operating system, which has become the standard now, and now we are running Red Hat Enterprise Linux on it. So this concludes the basics of getting started with a Linux installation on your power systems environment. Thank you.